Did somebody say late to the party? Yeah, I know at this point everyone and their mum has given their opinion on this movie. But not only is my opinion far more important, obviously, I also thought that since the movie takes place in December, it's technically a Christmas movie, right? What the heck. It's an excuse to talk about Spider-Man, okay? Just roll with it. Now, before we begin this review essay thing, take a sip by the fire, grab yourself a nice hot chocolate, and snuggle up into your favorite Spider-Man onesie. Unless you live in Australia. In which case, grab a cold one and crank that AC up, baby, cause it's hot. Also, FYI, I started this video as just a review of No Way Home, but instead it kinda turned into a full review of the Home trilogy, because once I start, I can't stop apparently. That being said, I go into greater detail with No Way Home, so if you haven't seen the movie, now's your chance to click away. Spider-Man in the MCU. What a ride it's been, huh? I'm still honestly amazed that Sony and Marvel have been able to play nice for so long, despite the numerous times we hear they're on the verge of Corpo War. But I guess money sings, right? And when you're a big juicy IP like Spider-Man, everyone gets a nice big slice of that spider pie. But I digress. Spider-Man and his time in the MCU, and the deals that it took to get him there, have been, at least in my opinion, totally worth it. But what can I say? I'm biased. From the moment this guy was confirmed to be appearing in Civil War, well, I don't think I've been that hyped for a moment in a long time. God, that's sad. I gotta say, when it was announced Tom Holland would be playing the MCU's Peter Parker, I kinda scratched my head and went, who? And that's not a bad thing. I like when Spider-Man are played by relatively unknown folk. That way I don't just see an actor playing Spider-Man. All I know about the guy was that he looked the part and he could do some cool flips, so like, that's pretty much my checklist done right there. And when Civil War finally released, you bet your butt I was there opening night for my guy. I still remember almost losing my mind in the theater when that Queen's title card popped onto the screen. I remember leaving that movie feeling like, at long last, we finally have a Spider-Man that actually looks like he should be in high school, even though Tom Holland was, yeah. Just gonna skip that part. And it seemed like the actor knew how to play a dorky Peter, who's also a pretty witty Spider-Man. Yes, it's the thing you've heard a billion times. Toby was a better Peter, Andrew was a better Spider-Man, blah blah, with Tom being that sweet middle spot. Look, I don't think this sentiment is wrong by any means, but I still think Toby played an excellent Spider-Man, even if he wasn't quipping all the time. And I don't really mind Andrew's Peter, it was more reflective of what a nerd was when I was growing up, and I feel like half the criticism was just because Andrew was a good-looking guy. Which, I mean, he can't help, come on. So is Tom Holland the most accurate Spidey? Well, no. I don't think any of them really are, but does he encapsulate the awkward nerdiness of Peter, while still having a little sass every now and then, while also being a funny and relatable Spidey? I think so. I know there was a period there where the internet liked to refer to this guy as Iron Boy Jr., and some still do, and while I absolutely get what the name is trying to suggest, I think No Way Home kinda taught us the value of waiting. I mean, we knew this was gonna be a trilogy, and trilogies usually have an overarching story, usually, and I think the Iron Boy Jr. criticism was kind of part of that story. Alright, I've jumped the gun way too quickly here, so let's rewind back to before No Way Home. So you all know the story. Peter Parker was recruited by Tony Stark in Civil War to help him detain Team Cap, where this kid puts up a hell of a display against the Avengers' top dogs. He's then basically sent away to prove himself, and by prove himself, I mean get ghosted by Iron Man for the majority of Homecoming. He then discovers that Liz's dad, the girl he's super into, is actually the Vulture, in what is probably one of my favorite Spider-Man scenes, like, ever. Peter has to decide whether he's ready to be Spider-Man, even when it's not always convenient. You know, like leaving your date at the prom. And after a final battle with Vulture, in which he saves Toomes' life, he realizes he's perfectly content with being the friendly neighborhood Spider-Man, and rejects Tony's offer to become an Avenger. We fast forward to roughly 2 years after the events of Homecoming, and thanks to the arrival of Thanos' goons, Spidey has to take a ride to space and somehow help a bunch of weirdos he just met, as well as Iron Man and a very condescending wizard, defeat the Titan himself. This goes about as well as you'd expect, and despite a pretty close struggle, Peter and pretty much everyone else on the planet except Tony, Nebula, and of course Thanos go poof. Alright, but seriously, this scene still chokes me up. I don't like seeing my boy all scared and confused, and I'll admit I was a slobbering mess in the theater. Not since the old days of Toy Story 3 did my tears go that hard. We don't see our boy again until the events of Endgame, where he's brought back along with the rest of the snapped Avengers thanks to the OGs pulling a time heist to save the universe. The war between Earth's mightiest heroes and Thanos' army claims the life of Iron Man, who sacrifices himself by using the Infinity Gauntlet to perform the Victory Snap. Roughly 8 months pass after the death of Iron Man, and we begin the events of Far From Home with Peter struggling to overcome the grief and loss he feels after Tony's sacrifice, with the whole world basically expecting this guy to step up and become the new Iron Man. Luckily for Peter, A school trip to Europe is about to give him a nice opportunity to sit back and relax, as well as get closer to his crush Michelle Jones. Or MJ for short. Look, I don't know why they just didn't call her Mary Jane, unless they're going to reveal later on that Peter meets another woman called Mary Jane. He also goes by MJ, but that'd be stupid. So yeah, Peter gets to enjoy a nice vacation to Europe, bond with the girl he likes, and finally take some time away from being Spider-Man. Psych! Yeah, so while Peter is in Venice, a giant water elemental decides to crash the party, and thus hijack his entire vacation, as he now has to team up with Nick Fury and what's left of S.H.I.E.L.D. to help a hero called Mysterio take down a bunch of elemental titans that caused the destruction of Quentin Beck's world. Wow, that was a mouthful. Seriously, why didn't I put more commas in there? What the hell was wrong with me? A full stop or something at least. Well anyway, this Quentin Beck man, he seems, very honest and nice. I sure hope he sticks around and becomes a positive mentor for Peter. Yeah, this is a Spider-Man movie, remember? There's no such thing as a responsible father figure. Only uncles. Yeah, so as you already know, Mysterio is actually a disgruntled tech bro who had a bit of beef with Tony back in the day, and now wants to use his illusion tech to become the next big Iron Man. How does he do that, you ask? I don't know why I'm framing this as you asking the question, because you already know. Well, it turns out these elemental titans are actually illusions, just like Mysterio, and he's basically tricked the world, as well as Peter, into thinking he's stopping multi-dimensional titans. So after Peter comes to terms with the fact that Quentin Beck is 1, a liar, and 2, Peter can't just pawn the responsibility Tony gave him, aka the glasses, onto someone else, Peter suits up and confronts Mysterio in London, where he manages to overcome Mysterio in, and I'm gonna say this a lot, one of the best scenes in a Spider-Man movie. Seriously though, Far From Home is full of great visual effects, from the whole mirror trick and Undead Iron Man sequence to that awesome Spider-Sense scene. I don't think any Spider-Man movie has quite done Spider-Sense that much justice before. It's usually just depicted as a warning sign he may or may not dodge, but here you can really see just how much awareness it gives the guy. Even with his eyes closed in a room made of illusions, he's still able to perfectly predict the drone attacks and disarm Quentin before he can get the ambush. We end Far From Home with MJ and Spidey taking a swing around New York, where MJ has about the reaction I'd expect from that experience. As Peter drops MJ off in Times Square, we cut to a news report from the Daily Bugle, where we see the one and only himself reveal the identity of Peter Parker. Yeah, so Mysterio just straight up doxes the kid as the ultimate trump card. And so with No Way Home, we pick up from where we left off. Literally, these two movies end and start seconds apart, and we get to see the direct aftermath of Mysterio's doxing, as pretty much everyone in the city now wants a slice of that Peter pie. Pretty sure I've made that joke before, but spider pie. Including the feds. Thankfully for Peter though, he has a good lawyer. Everyone, clap! He's also struggling with his upcoming MIT application, and by struggling I mean he kinda finds out he straight up didn't get accepted. And not only that, we find out Ned and MJ also didn't get in thanks to their connections to Spider-Man. In an attempt to make sure him and his friends can get into college, Peter decides to visit the Sorcerer Supreme himself, Wong. No, but seriously, he visits Stephen Strange. And after honestly not a lot of convincing, Doctor Strange agrees to help Peter out by casting a spell that'll make everyone forget he's Spider-Man, because these two are the world's biggest idiots. They don't have a discussion about any of the spell's effects beforehand, so Peter basically starts shouting out changes to the spell, and Strange actually attempts to alter the spell. Yeah, I don't know. This part honestly seems a little flimsy given the level of intelligence these two are supposed to have. I get Peter is still just a kid who's not exactly thinking things through, but you'd at least expect Doctor Strange to have a little more foresight into the potential consequences this spell could unleash onto the world, or at least sit down with Peter and work out exactly how he wants the spell cast. This is one of those pet peeves I have a lot with these movies, where a fair chunk of the issues these characters could have could just be solved by 10 minutes sit down and chat. But the movie has to happen, so away we go. And yeah, look, it would be boring if that was the movie. Imagine only being 30 minutes in the movie, and it just abruptly ends because Stephen explains the spell and Peter's like, "Understood, sir, have a good day." Tom Holland does not sound like that, I don't know where that came from. So yeah, it turns out Strange's spell straight up doesn't work, since everyone still knows Peter Parker is Spider-Man. So with all hope exhausted, Peter turns to the only person he has left, Flash Thompson. Chad Flash gives Peter the location of one of the MIT administrators, and as Peter straight up ambushes the lady to explain why his friend should be let into MIT, in classic Spidey fashion, Peter is interrupted by the sudden appearance of Doc Ock. Oh my god, that's crazy, whoa. No, but for real, bringing back Alfred Molina as Dr. Octopus is always a safe bet. The dude's a fantastic actor, and he slips back into the role with ease. Also, the fight between Doc Ock and Spidey on the bridge is a big highlight of the movie for me. It's a really fun scene, especially when Peter figures out how to neutralize the guy's arms, and he's just sort of flailing his actual arms around trying to hit the guy. As Peter starts trying to figure out who this strange octopus man is, we see the iconic pumpkin bomb being thrown onto the highway, followed by a bunch of explosions. Ooh yeah baby, it's the Goblin himself. But before Spidey and the Goblin have their big showdown, we gotta set some stakes, baby. So Doctor Strange comes in just in time to vanish Spidey and Dr. Ock out of there. I don't know why I keep calling him Dr. Ock. I do that all the time and then I gotta do it again. Doc Ock. With the gang now at Strange's hideout, as well as a captured Doc Ock, Doctor Strange goes on to explain that Peter interfering with the spell seems to have spawned a bunch of multiverse villains. We already know Peter is Spider-Man, so Peter is tasked with cleaning up his mess, which involves tracking down all his variant villains and putting them back behind bars. Or in this case, magic wards? I don't know. As Peter gets on with the task, he inevitably runs into the scariest spider villain of them all, Jamie Foxx. The two have a small skirmish in the woods, where Spidey is suddenly caught off guard by Sandman. However, it seems Sandman isn't here to fight, but rather he's just trying to figure out what the F is going on. Peter agrees to explain everything to Flint if he helps him take down Electro, to which Flint obliges. The two manage to send Electro away thanks to a magic web shooter gauntlet Strange gave Peter earlier on, and Flint joins him soon after trying to attack Peter because he thought Spider-Man straight up sent that man to the Shadow Realm. As Peter mops up the mess he made fighting Electro, he gets a call from Aunt May who lets him know that one of his villains has come to Feast. Peter rushes to Feast expecting a fight, but instead sees a confused and scared Norman Osborn, who explains that he was simply looking for Spider-Man since he has no idea what's happening to it. I gotta talk about Willem Dafoe's acting in this scene. It's just pure perfection, to be honest. He does a fantastic job of portraying Norman and the Goblin, and you can tell right away this man ain't in Goblin mode. It's really just Norman Osborn in one of the most vulnerable scenes we've seen him in. Aunt May and Peter take a break to discuss what they're going to do about these villains, to which Peter states he's going to send these guys home since they're kinda not his problem, and in his mind them getting help back home is what's best for them. Aunt May kind of refuses, however, believing Peter has a responsibility to help these people above just sending them home and calling it a day. I really love this whole scene. I think the Kill the Villains plot is just a really good way to drive home what Spider-Man is all about, and having Aunt May be used as the one to continually reinforce the idea is even better, as we get a better idea of where Peter's gentle nature comes from. And despite how much I bag old May out in the comics, she's arguably as important as Uncle Ben is on Peter's road to becoming a good person. Peter takes Norman back to the Doctor Strange detention. It's such a stupid line. Peter takes Norman back to the Doctor Strange detention center for delinquent villains. Peter takes Norman back to the Doctor Strange detention center for delinquent villains. We get some pretty funny back and forth between all the villains, as well as a pretty cool scene where Norman Osborn and Otto kinda catch up, with Otto explaining Norman's death and Sandman chipping in to explain Otto's death. Oh yeah, the Lizard is here too. Wow, I almost forgot about that slippery bugger. Yeah, the Lizard was the first villain to be captured by Doctor Strange. As these villains all catch up, it begins to dwell on them that pretty much all of them die. Well, except for Connors, I guess, since he ends up in prison. But you know what they say, give me liberty or give me death, baby, hell yeah. This also begins to dawn on Peter as he realizes he might just be sending all these guys to their doom. So as Strange walks in ready to wrap this movie up, Spidey decides maybe sending these fellas back to die ain't the most heroic move. So he steals the magic box they need to send them back, and we proceed to get an excellent chase scene between Spider-Man and Strange. Alright, so remember when I said Far From Home was by far the best display of Peter's spider sense? Well, I take it back. It's this scene by far. I mean, the dude's consciousness has been separated from his body, so it's just reacting on pure instinct. So Spidey ends up besting Strange in this scene, and before you power scalers lose your minds, Peter actually manages to win in a pretty creative way. So I think it justifies the victory by having Peter relying on his intellect over his strength to get the job done. That and obviously all Strange here was holding back on the kid, I mean come on. With Strange now trapped in his own mirror dimension, Spider-Man decides to bust all the villains out and take them to Happy's condo so he can fix them up. With help from the old Stark machine, of course. Alright, so seeing all these dudes just crammed in this condo, trying to go along with whatever Peter has cooking is just pure comedy. Especially Doc Ock just roasting everything he can see. Speaking of Doc Ock, thanks to the combined efforts of Norman and Peter, they're actually able to successfully fix the guy's arm problem. And we get a really beautiful scene where you can see the moment Doc Ock vanishes and Otto returns. Also, I forgot to mention, at this point Electro has been hooked up to a device that's basically slowly draining the guy's power, and as long as he keeps wearing it, he'll be back to normal in no time. Yeah, I'm sure that'll go well. So with Otto cured, Norman is up next, and yeah. things don't quite work out. So we begin to see hints of the goblin starting to rear his ugly head, but it's not just us whose vibes are off, as Peter starts to feel something in the air as well. And what a scene this is. Here it comes. This is one of the best scenes in a Spider-Man movie. But seriously, it absolutely is. The quietness of it all mixed with the eerie background noise is just pure unsettling fear, and it doesn't help that he's surrounded by a room full of guys who totally want to murder him. As Peter focuses in, he suddenly webs Norman's arm, at which point the goblin shows his evil face. Yeah, the condo scene is just lit. From the goblin's speech about being gods, to the slugfest between the two that takes them up and down the building. We haven't had a fight scene this raw since the good old Sam Raimi days. I hear Willem Dafoe and Tom Holland did the majority, if not all of their stunts, and man does it show. The camera really gets to linger on these scenes for a moment longer, rather than cutting all over the place, and the facial expressions Willem Dafoe gets to drop absolutely elevate the fight. So the fight ends with Peter getting his ass beat, as the dude gets slammed through a bunch of floors and is pretty much lights out. But unfortunately for the guy, it's about to get a lot worse, as Aunt May stumbles in and tries to save her nephew. The goblin basically pins Aunt May as the one to blame for Peter's weakness, and as one last thanks for trying to help the dude, he straight up rams his glider into Aunt May. Yeah, that looks like it hurt. Okay, this moment gets me every time. Honestly, I think having it revealed that Peter hasn't actually heard these words before, at least said in that order, really does a lot for the character, and helps to put into perspective that he really is just a fledgling Spider-Man at this point, and we're only now starting to see the beginnings of his origins as Spider-Man play out. Also, it's pretty clear we're not going to see the MCU Uncle Ben at this point, so I'm glad at least we get to see this important moment for Peter, rather than just never mentioning the line like it seemed like they were going to do. So with Aunt May gone, we cut to Ned and MJ, who are a bit concerned with their spider friend after the whole news report on the condo incident. Ned states that he wishes he could see Peter, and we see some sparks fly for a moment. See, Ned's wearing the sling ring, and it turns out the boy's a wizard. So Ned gives it a few more shots, and lo and behold, it's Spider-Man. Yeah, look, let's stop acting like this movie isn't already 2 years old. Yeah, Tobey and Andrew in this movie as their respective Peter Parkers, and what else is there to say other than it's the greatest moment in cinematic history? The two have a bit of a show off and work out pretty quickly that they're both Spider-Man, but not the Spider-Man they're after. To which MJ and Ned basically say the same thing, but thanks to Tobey knowing how broody a Spider-Man can be, he immediately asks if there's any particular rooftops he likes to mope around on. So lo and behold, we cut to Spider-Man moping on a rooftop. No, seriously, this whole scene of Peter in the rain, listening to JJ just roasting him, is one of my favourite scenes in the movie. It just feels like something ripped straight out of a comic book panel. As Peter is grieving over Aunt May, MJ and Ned give him a much needed hug, but it's soon cut short as Peter detects his other selves lurking in the distance. He goes on to explain to himself that he just wants to get these guys home at this point, and that he's done with the whole cure stuff. And as for Goblin, well, he wants to straight up whack the guy. Yeah, sorry, I've been watching The Sopranos recently. What can I say? Peter and Peter. You know, I'll just say Andrew and Tobey. Andrew and Tobey's Peter go on to explain their tragedies in life, with Tobey's Peter expressing his regrets towards the guy he thought murdered Uncle Ben, and Andrew in particular delivering some pretty sad lines about how hard it was for the guy after he lost Gwen. The two manage to convince Peter to try the Cure Act one last time, after Tom's Peter realises they're both haunted with the axe of revenge, and they've all heard the same line, with great power comes great responsibility, one way or the other. So before we get to the big showdown, we get some really nice scenes of the Spider-Men being science bros, as they each work out how to fix their villains, with Tobey's Peter using this as a chance to finally fix Norman Osborn, even if Tom's Peter still has other ideas. I really love Tobey and Andrew's scenes in particular. It's clear after the events of Amazing Spider-Man 2, Andrew's Spider-Man has been going through a lot, and it looks like seeing an older version of himself eventually figure things out helps the guy get back to being himself. I'd go more into detail about all three of the Spider Bros hanging out before the final fight, but what can I say that hasn't already been said? I mean, sometimes I'll be doing some stupid stuff like the dishes, and I'll smile knowing these scenes exist. Yeah, my life's that sad. I'd just watch a whole movie of these guys talking about their lives and just being bros, but this is good enough. So the Spider Dudes create their antidotes, and Peter announces to the world, thanks to the hero JJ himself, that he's waiting for all his villains on the Statue of Liberty. Because we gotta have an iconic landmark for our big fight, of course. Yeah, so it's absolutely sick seeing the three Spider-Men work together, even if they suck at it at first. I just adore the little moments we get between these two Spider-Men and their old villains, Max and Spidey's Andrew in particular are a highlight, since they act more like old friends catching up other than enemies. And yeah, that scene between Toby's Peter and Otto was enough to make a grown man cry. I was him, the grown man was me, okay? Speaking of crying, when Andrew's Peter caught MJ, my god, what a cathartic moment that was. Our boy deserved it, that's all. So as the Spider-Man go about picking these villains off one at a time, Strange finally manages to break out of his mirror dimension and well, he's kinda pissed. Luckily the Spider Bros are here to back Peter up. Unluckily, the Green Goblin shows up right on time to interrupt the party. Tom's Peter manages to get a hold of Goblin's glider, and after a few hits, the two go crushing down onto what looks to be a final boss arena, I'm not gonna lie. Alright, so this fight goes hard. This is the first time we've seen a Spider-Man this pissed off, and you can tell from that big ground punch this man was going for the kill. Like seriously, the dent in that shield was about to be poor Norman's head if he was a second slower. So yeah, Peter absolutely clowns the man in a super cathartic beatdown. But despite Peter giving it everything he has, the Goblin continues to mock the kid, until eventually he decides maybe this guy does just really need a glider to the heart. Thankfully for Peter, Toby's Spider-Man shows up just in time to make sure he doesn't commit a no-no before 21. Yeah, I straight up thought they were about to kill Toby here, I won't lie, but come on, the guy's been stabbed before, this is whatever. So with all the villains cured, we can finally wrap this story up. Nah, just kidding. So it turns out pretty much every villain from the history of Spider-Man is about to come crashing into the MCU. And this is one whole Strange can't patch up. So Peter decides to do the only thing he can think to do, have Doctor Strange cast a new spell that makes everyone, and I mean everyone, forget that Peter Parker was ever Spider-Man. Strange reluctantly agrees, and we get to see Peter say his goodbyes to the two Spider-Men, as well as his final goodbyes to MJ and Ned, promising that he'll come find them once this is all over. So the next few sequences of this movie are by far the highlights to me. From Peter approaching MJ at her workplace and slowly realising he'd be doing his friends far less harm if they maybe never knew the guy, to him and Happy having one last moment at Aunt May's grave, as they both grieve over their loss, the last connection they had left in this world. And of course, the final swing. Now before I get to that final swing, I want to take a moment to try and make sense of what I'm trying to say here, because trust me, I don't know what I'm trying to say half the time either. There are a lot of ways you can interpret the home trilogy, and none of them are wrong. Art is of course subjective, and no one answer is ever really right or wrong. So with that in mind, if I were to give my thoughts on what the home trilogy means to me, or what I think it's about, well it's kinda simple to be honest. To me the home trilogy is the typical coming of age story, but rather than being told in a world without heroes like the previous two Spider-Man entries, the home trilogy focuses on what it's like to be a super kid in a world with superheroes. A world where what it means to be a superhero was defined long before Peter ever came along. Growing up as a kid, and especially teens, a sense of identity is something we strive to cut out for ourselves. And in a world full of adults who have set the clear definitions of success beforehand, it's only natural we aspire to be the adults we believe best represent the people we'd like to be. From athletes to fictional characters. I'm sure we've all had role models at some point as kids and even adults. And I'm sure they've played some role in the identity we've carved out for ourselves during our adolescence. So with that perspective in mind, it's hard, at least for me, to not buy the fact that I totally get why so much of Peter's journey in the home trilogy is emulating Iron Man. That's the superhero in his world, so it only makes sense for the kid when Tony comes knocking on his door. As I said earlier on in this video, the Iron Boy Jr. stuff is what the story uses to tell this overarching narrative, because he's not Spider-Man at this point, or even Spider-Boy. He's a kid who's had powers for a short time, and he doesn't know what a Spider-Man should be yet, other than a very broad sense of use your powers to do the right thing. And the home trilogy takes that idea in Civil War, that youthful idealism he has towards Iron Man, and what it means to be your own man, and it tells a compelling arc where Peter begins his journey wanting nothing more to be the next Iron Man, but after Tony's death, he realizes just how much weight being the next Iron Man really entails. And thanks to some advice from Happy, he decides he'll never live up to the Iron Man he had in his head, because that was always just an ideal. But with Iron Man out of the picture, and no identity carved for Spider-Man, Peter struggles to figure out where he stands numerous times in No Way Home, with Strange representing the more calculated and logical approach Peter learnt from Tony Stark, and Aunt May reminding him of the inherent goodness he possesses thanks to her and Ben. And once Peter does meet his adult selves, and not just as adults but as superheroes, he finally begins to understand and realise what it means to be Spider-Man, and not just the name and web shooters, but the ideals and responsibilities that come with it. The idea that sometimes we have to give up the things we love the most, even our dreams, if it's the right thing to do. And that's why when we get to that final swing scene where it's revealed Peter has a new suit, the costume is no longer emulating Iron Man, like the Iron Spider suit was. Nor does it resemble any other suits from the MCU. Instead, it's as classic Spider-Man as they come, and it's almost a blend between both Andrew and Tobey's suits, at least if you compare the spiders. I'm not sure if that was intentional, but I like to think so. And as Spider-Man leaps out of his apartment and swings above the streets, it's hard not to feel like we really have watched this guy grow from a Spider Boy, or Iron Boy Jr., to a Spider-Man. And well, that's because we have. As I mentioned before, it's a classic coming-of-age story, just told in a way we're maybe not used to due to the formula of past Spidey movies, and that's okay. Is No Way Home, and to a greater extent the Home Trilogy, perfect? Well, no, of course not. I'll be honest in saying Spider-Man 2 is still my favourite live-action Spidey movie, even if Tom Holland might be my favourite Spider-Man. But that changes so many times, it's better to just not pick one, at least for me. But I do have to applaud the trilogy for taking a criticism like Iron Boy Jr. and using it to tell a pretty cohesive narrative, rather than backtracking and trying to do something completely different. And thanks to that ending in No Way Home, I for one can't wait to see what's coming next for Spidey in the MCU. I mean, seriously, I've lost a bunch of interest in the MCU as of late, and that's not because I personally think the quality's dropped. I mean, I haven't watched enough of it to come to that conclusion myself. It's just that, I'm kind of a Spider-Man guy, and there's so much content now that I only really like to keep track of things with Spider-Man in it. So yeah, Spider-Man 4, I can't wait to see what they've got cooking. I just hope they continue to lean into this, mature, own man sort of Spider-Man, and not just backtrack and have him team up with a bunch of superheroes left, right, and center because he doesn't know how to handle a situation. But I digress. I think Spider-Man's in good hands, and I think whatever they have in store for the guy is gonna be good. So yeah, those are my thoughts on the Home Trilogy. If you like this video and you want to see more content like this, feel free to drop a like and subscribe. And remember, true believers, have a Merry Christmas and a Happy Holidays.